If these guys had their way, Iran's going to have nuclear weapons. Ukraine's going to be rolled over with Poland under attack. I don't even understand. In fact, if they have their way in the Middle East, the Houthis are going to keep shooting missiles into Israel. In fact, they'll be able to do more because there's no limits on them. Hamas will survive because people keep saying, ceasefire, ceasefire. Hamas will survive. The Houthis will be shooting missiles into Israel, and Iran will have a nuclear weapon. Even though Israel's kicked the asses of Hamas, Hezbollah, and we did of the Houthis, they'll be stronger than ever before. And worse than that, if we have some kind of deal with Iran, we're going to be funding their economy and protecting them from Israel. Now, speaking of Ukraine, well, something happened. The Ukrainians blew up about 30% of the Russian bombers, nuclear bombers. That is, their best bombers. And with absolute genius, just like when the Israelis took out most of the Hezbollah leadership. So now we have Ukraine, and so brilliant is what they did. I can't figure out exactly what they did. But they moved these things into these storage buildings and trash cans or whatever they were, and they had sort of mechanical tops on them. And I think they were in 3 airfields where the Russians have most of their bombers parked. And then all of a sudden, the roofs came off, the lids came off, and out come the drones. And apparently they're not particularly sophisticated drones, but they're sophisticated enough. And boom, 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 boom. These planes are blowing up on the tarmac. Wouldn't you have loved to have been a fly on the wall to see what Putin's reaction was? Who should I kill for this? I'm talking about his own people. Who was in charge of this airbase and that base, and who did this and who did... Okay, it's time for them to take a trip to our special hotel on the 19th floor. You understand, where they're still learning how to fly with their arms. Let's take a look at this. This is from ABC7 Chicago. Go.
Ukraine's domestic intelligence agency, the SBU, carrying out a large-scale operation Sunday, targeting Russian military airfields. Dramatic video shared with ABC News by the SBU shows aircraft being hit and bursting into flames. The attacks carried out at different airfields in 5 Russian regions, some home to Russian strategic bombers. A source within the SBU claims they hit more than 40 military aircraft that they say, quote, bomb Ukrainian cities every night. A source in the SBU tells ABC News the operation had been planned for more than a year and a half. Drones were concealed inside makeshift mobile houses with retractable roofs, which were then placed on trucks. The source said those roofs opened remotely and the drones flown out to strike.
Unbelievable.
Russian officials are also investigating 2 train derailments they say happened after 2 bridges were blown up in separate Russian regions, this near the border with Ukraine. Meanwhile, Moscow continued its massive air assault. The Ukrainian Air Force reported 479 drones and missiles were launched into the country overnight in one of the largest aerial attacks of the 3-year-old war.
And by the way, a lot of these drones are sophisticated drones built by Iran. So Iran's giving them sophisticated drones. North Korea's giving them some of their troops, who are basically fodder. The Communist Chinese are giving them all kinds of equipment and so forth. So that right in this place, you see the Axis powers, the axis of evil, as George W. Bush would put it, but the Axis powers with China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. Go ahead.
Russia has proposed a new round of peace talks to be held in Istanbul on Monday. And 2 U.S. senators who were in Kyiv on Friday have warned Russian President Vladimir Putin is stalling on peace talks while preparing a new military offensive against Ukraine.
Ending this war the right way makes the world safer. If you end it in a way like we did with Afghanistan, you're setting the world on fire.
Putin will keep going if he's not stopped in Ukraine. And then we will have to put troops on the ground by virtue of our treaty obligations.
The senators say a sweeping U.S. sanctions bill backed by 82 of their colleagues could be the last chance to sever the economic lifeline fueling Russia's war.
Now let me explain a few things here. Number one, what Senator Blumenthal meant there was the triggering of the NATO provision where we will come to the defense of any NATO country. Putin has said that he wants to roll through Ukraine and attack Poland. Poland. Think about that. Which is why Poland has taken its air force and given it basically to Ukraine with a few held back. They're giving them everything they can because they know that they're next on the list. And they're not the only ones. He's talked about Romania. He's talked about the Baltic states. This guy is serious. I don't know why people... again, I don't know why people don't take seriously what fascists and Islamists and communists have to say. I mean, he's doing it, isn't he? And he just keeps throwing people at it, and people go, this is horrible. President Trump, it's horrible. Of course it's horrible. But that's what Stalin did. He sends these guys into the meat grinder. It doesn't matter how many are dead. It doesn't matter how many are killed. He'll just keep sending them in and sending them in. He knows that he's got about 3.5, 4 times the population of Russians, that Ukraine has Ukrainians. He knows that. And so they just throw them into the grinder. And that's the way it goes. And that's the way it went in World War II, as a matter of fact. And that's why they prevailed, or do prevail on so many occasions. And I have to say one other thing about this. When they're talking about Lindsey Graham saying it can end one of 2 ways, he's correct. Now, the problem is we now know since this report what it is that the Russians are proposed for peace. They want like another third of Ukraine. They're insisting that the Ukrainian army be cut by a substantial amount, perhaps in half. They want a new election to get rid of Zelensky. And then it goes on. And of course, basically, they want Ukraine to surrender in order to have peace discussions. So they're not going to do that, nor should they. So again, like with the Islamo-Nazi regime in Tehran, the fascistic regime in Moscow, they play rope-a-dope. Just how long can we spread this out? How long can we do this? Now, the Ukrainians are now using, in some respects, their special forces for guerrilla tactics. That's how they blew up all those bombers. And you saw one after another getting hit. More damage was done to the Russian, and prior to that, the Soviet Air Force, than since the end of World War II, by that one attack. Since that report, they've blown up the only bridge between Crimea and, I guess, Russia territory, in order to get supplies to their forces. The Ukrainians blew it up. And they could use ships, but the Ukrainians have been blowing up their ships too. It doesn't take much. A shoulder-launching missile can do that, and they have a number of those, thanks to the first Trump administration, as a matter of fact. So that's what's going on right now. And of course, I saw one guy say, one of these isolationists say, we got to cut off Ukraine altogether. Why? Because what they did with those bombers, it's provocative. Now, so Ukraine can't fight back. They're not allowed to win. Is that where we stand on this thing? No, I don't think so. If these guys had their way, Iran's going to have nuclear weapons. Ukraine's going to be rolled over with Poland under attack. I don't even understand. In fact, if they have their way in the Middle East, the Houthis are going to keep shooting missiles into Israel. In fact, they'll be able to do more because there's no limits on them. Hamas will survive because people keep saying, ceasefire, ceasefire. Hamas will survive. The Houthis will be shooting missiles into Israel, and Iran will have a nuclear weapon. Even though Israel's kicked the asses of Hamas, Hezbollah, and we did of the Houthis, they'll be stronger than ever before. And worse than that, if we have some kind of deal with Iran, we're going to be funding their economy and protecting them from Israel. Think about this. I don't think that's Trump's position, by the way. I think it's some of the Lilliputians. This is the sort of stuff that they're pushing, because they have about 14 minutes experience in foreign policy and national security. Some of them just passed through puberty. So that means they know everything, when in fact they know absolutely nothing. And some of them are just ideologues. And really, ideology is not the way you play the foreign policy game. I've talked about this. Prudence is you look at the facts, you look at your principles, you look at the military and strategic situation, you make decisions. It's not, hey, forever wars. Hey, you're a warmonger. Hey, you're a neocon. That's all very interesting, and it's also very pathetic.
For all this and much more, sign up for Levin TV.